The rain battered the windows, a relentless drumbeat that drowned out the world beyond. Ethan sat frozen on the couch, his heart pounding louder than the storm outside. He'd been to Jake's house 100 times, but tonight felt different, electric. Dangerous, like a wire about to snap. They'd been friends since high school. Two misfits in a small Ohio town where everyone knew everyone's business. Ethan, with his quiet intensity and love for old vinyl records, was the dreamer. Jake, brash and magnetic, hid his scars behind a leather jacket and a quick grin. They were inseparable, the kind of friends who could finish each other's sentences, who shared secrets over late-night drives. But tonight, in Jake's cramped living room, something unspoken hung heavy between them, a truth neither had dared to name. Ethan glanced at Jake, sprawled across the couch, his dark hair damp from the rain. They'd planned a simple night pizza, a movie, maybe some beers. But the storm had trapped them here, the power flickering. And now the air felt charged with something Ethan couldn't ignore. "You okay?" Jake asked, his voice low, almost cautious. Ethan nodded, but his throat tightened. He wasn't okay. He hadn't been okay for months. It started last summer, a fleeting moment at the lake. They'd been swimming, laughing, the sun glinting off the water. Jake had tackled Ethan into the shallows, their bodies tangled in the warm waves. For a split second, their eyes locked, and Ethan felt something shift to pull, a warmth that wasn't just friendship. He'd buried it, told himself it was nothing. But the feeling grew, clawing at him every time Jake's hand brushed his shoulder or their laughter synced in perfect rhythm. Now, sitting here, Ethan couldn't shake it. The way Jake's gaze lingered a little too long. The way his own heart raced when Jake leaned closer to grab a slice of pizza. The room felt too small, the storm too loud, and Ethan's carefully built walls were crumbling. "You ever think about what we don't say?" Ethan blurted, his voice barely above a whisper. Jake froze, pizza halfway to his mouth. His green eyes flicked to Ethan, sharp and searching. "What's that supposed to mean?" His tone was guarded, but there was a crack in it, a hint of something raw. Ethan's pulse hammered. He could back off, laugh it away like always. But the words were there, heavy and inevitable. "You know what I mean, Jake. Don't pretend you don't feel it too." The silence that followed was deafening. Jake set the pizza down, his jaw tight. Outside, lightning cracked, illuminating the room in stark white. Ethan's heart sank. Had he ruined everything? But then Jake turned, his expression unreadable. "Ethan, you don't know what you're asking." "I'm not asking," Ethan said, his voice trembling but firm. "I'm saying it. I feel something. For you. And I think you feel it too." Jake's breath hitched. He stood abruptly, pacing to the window, his back to Ethan. The rain streaked down the glass, mirroring the chaos in Ethan's chest. "You don't get it," Jake said, his voice rough. "This isn't some movie. This is real life. You say that here, in this house, and it changes everything." "Maybe I wanted to change," Ethan shot back, standing now, his hands shaking. "Maybe I'm tired of pretending I don't care about you like that." Jake spun around, his eyes blazing. "And what happens when everyone finds out? This town, Ithanth'll tear us apart. My dad, your mom, the guys at the garage. They don't exactly roll out the welcome mat for this." Ethan stepped closer, closing the distance. "I don't care about them. I care about you. About us." Jake laughed, a bitter sound. "Us? There's no us if we can't even be honest with ourselves." But his voice cracked, and Ethan saw it: fear, the longing, the same storm raging in Jake that was tearing through him. The power flickered again, plunging the room into darkness for a heartbeat. When the light returned, Jake was closer. Too close. His breath warm against Ethan's cheek. "You're gonna break me, man," Jake whispered, his voice raw. "You're gonna break everything." "Then let it break," Ethan said, and before he could think, he reached out, his hand grazing Jake's arm. The touch was electric, a spark that lit up years of unspoken truths. Jake didn't pull away. Instead, his hand found Ethan's, fingers trembling as they intertwined. For a moment, the world was just them, the rain, the dim light, the heat of their hands. Ethan's heart soared, but fear gnawed at him. What came next? Could they survive this? The town, their families, the weight of who they were supposed to be. Jake's phone buzzed on the coffee table, shattering the moment. He pulled back, his face pale. The screen lit up with a name, Dad. Jake's father. A man whose disapproval could crush Jake with a single word. Ethan's stomach twisted. This was only the beginning. The air in the room thickened, the weight of Jake's phone buzzing like a warning siren. Ethan watched as Jake stared at the screen, his hands still warm from their fleeting touch. "Don't answer it," Ethan said, his voice low, almost pleading. But Jake's hand twitched, and Ethan knew he would. He always did. Jake snatched the phone, his expression hardening. "Yeah, Dad." His voice was clipped, the warmth from moments ago gone. Ethan couldn't hear the other side, but Jake's jaw tightened, his free hand balling into a fist. "I'm fine. Storm's bad. I'm not going anywhere." A pause. Then, "No, just me and Ethan." The way he said it quick, defensive, made Ethan's chest ache. When Jake hung up, he didn't meet Ethan's eyes. He tossed the phone onto the couch and ran a hand through his hair. Pacing again. "He's checking up on me. Always does when I'm not at the garage." His voice was bitter, laced with years of unspoken resentment. Ethan wanted to reach out, to pull Jake back to that moment before the call. But the distance between them felt like miles now. "Jake, talk to me," he said instead, stepping closer. "What's going on?" Jake laughed, a hollow sound. "What's going on? You just dropped a bomb on me. Ethan, you think I can jest? What? Say I feel the same and everything's fine." He stopped pacing, his eyes locking onto Ethan's. "My dad would kill me. You know how he is. You've seen it." Ethan did know. Jake's dad, Mike, was a mechanic with a temper as rough as the engines he fixed. He'd never hidden his disdain for anything that didn't fit his narrow view of the world. Ethan remembered the time Mike caught them skipping school to listen to records in Jake's garage. The way he'd grabbed Jake's arm, his voice low and venomous. "Don't embarrass me." Ethan had felt the shame radiating off Jake. Even then, "I don't care about your dad," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. "I care about you. About what we could be." Jake's eyes softened for a moment, but then he shook his head. "You don't get it, Ethan. You've got your mom, your art school dreams. You're leaving this town. I'm stuck here, in that garage, under his thumb. If we..." He trailed off, his voice breaking. Ethan's heart twisted. He'd always known Jake felt trapped, but hearing it now, raw and exposed, hit hard. He stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in Jake's eyes. "You're not stuck. You could come with me. We could figure it out." Jake's laugh was sharp, almost cruel. "Figure it out? In what world? Ethan, you think we can just run off to some city and be, what? Together. Out in the open. You know what happens to guys like us here." Ethan flinched but didn't back down. "Maybe not here. Maybe somewhere else." Somewhere we don't have to hide. Jake stared at him, his chest rising and falling fast. You make it sound so easy, he whispered. But it's not. You don't know what it's like. Carrying this. Knowing what people would say. What they'd do. Ethan's throat tightened. He did know. He'd spent years hiding his own feelings, dodging questions about why he didn't date, why he spent all his time with Jake. But tonight, he was done hiding. I know it's not easy, he said, but I'm here. Jake, I'm right here. For a moment, Jake looked like he might break, like he might close the gap between them again. But then the power flickered once more, and the room plunged into darkness. Ethan heard Jake's sharp intake of breath, felt the shift in the air. When the lights came back, Jake was across the room, his back to the wall, his eyes haunted. I need air, Jake muttered, grabbing his jacket. Before Ethan could stop him, he was out the door, into the storm. Ethan stood frozen, the rain's roar filling the silence. He wanted to chase after him, to drag Jake back and make him face this. But his legs wouldn't move. Instead, he sank onto the couch, his mind replaying every word, every touch. Had he pushed too far? Had he lost Jake for good? Minutes passed, or maybe hours. The storm didn't let up, and neither did the ache in Ethan's chest. He grabbed his phone, his thumb hovering over Jake's name. He typed a message, then deleted it. What could he say? I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. Come back. The door creaked open, and Ethan's head snapped up. Jake stood there, soaked to the bone, his eyes red-rimmed. I tried to walk away, he said, his voice barely audible over the rain. But I couldn't. Ethan stood, his heart in his throat. Why not? Jake crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping inches from Ethan. Water dripped from his hair, his jacket, pooling on the floor. Because you're right, he said, his voice raw. I feel it too. I've felt it for years. The words hit Ethan like a tidal wave. He reached out, his hand finding Jake's. And this time, Jake didn't pull away. They stood there, hands clasped, the storm raging outside, the world shrinking to just them. But then Jake's phone buzzed again. He didn't look at it, but the sound was a reminder of everything waiting to tear them apart. Ethan squeezed his hand tighter. We'll figure it out, he said, his voice fierce. Together. Jake nodded, but his eyes were shadowed with doubt. The night was far from over, and the storm both outside and within was only beginning. The rain didn't stop, a relentless curtain sealing them in Jake's living room. Ethan's hand still gripped Jake's, their fingers locked in a quiet defiance against the world outside. But the buzz of Jake's phone lingered like a ghost, a reminder that this moment fragile, real couldn't last. Jake pulled his hand away, not roughly, but with a hesitance that cut Ethan deeper than rejection. We can't just do this, Jake said, his voice low, almost lost in the storm's roar. He sank onto the couch, his wet jacket discarded on the floor, his eyes fixed on the coffee table. You don't know what it's like, Ethan. The weight of it. Ethan sat beside him, close but not touching. Then tell me, he said. Make me understand. Jake's laugh was bitter, his head tipping back against the couch. My dad caught me once. You know, looking at stuff on my phone. I was 16. He didn't say anything, just looked at me like I was a stranger. Next day, he had me working double shifts at the garage, like he could sweat it out of me. Jake's voice cracked, and he pressed his palms to his eyes. I've been running from that look ever since. Ethan's chest tightened. He'd seen glimpses of Jake's fear over the years, the way he'd tense when his dad's name came up, the way he'd dodge questions about his future. But this was different. This was Jake peeling back layers Ethan had never touched, exposing a wound that had festered for years. "I'm not running," Ethan said softly. "I'm right here, Jake. And I see you. Not the garage. Not your dad shadow you." Jake's hands dropped, and he turned to Ethan, his eyes glassy. "You say that now? But what happens when your mom finds out? When the whole town knows? You think they'll just shrug and say, 'Good for you'?" Ethan thought of his mom. Kind but traditional. Her world built on church suppers and small-town gossip. She loved him. But this? He didn't know. Still, he leaned closer, his voice steady. "Let them talk. Let them hate. I'd rather face that than lose you." Jake's breath hitched, and for a moment, Ethan thought he might close the distance again. But Jake stood, pacing to the window, his silhouette stark against the rain-streaked glass. "You're braver than me," he said, almost to himself. "Always have been." "That's not true," Ethan said, standing too. "You're here, aren't you? You came back." Jake turned, his expression torn between fear and something softer, something that made Ethan's heart ache. "I came back because I'm an idiot," Jake said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Because even when I'm scared out of my mind, I can't walk away from you." Ethan crossed the room, stopping just short of Jake. The air between them crackled, heavy with everything unsaid. "Then don't," Ethan whispered. "Stay?" For a heartbeat, Jake didn't move. Then, slowly, he reached out, his fingers brushing Ethan's cheek. The touch was tentative, like he was testing the weight of his own courage. Ethan leaned into it, his eyes closing, the world narrowing to the warmth of Jake's hand. The kiss came like a spark, sudden and searing. Jake's lips were soft but urgent, tasting of rain and desperation. Ethan kissed him back, his hands finding Jake's shoulders, pulling him closer. It wasn't perfect, it was messy, trembling, full of years of fear and want, but it was theirs. They broke apart, breathless, foreheads pressed together. "This is insane," Jake murmured, his voice shaky but warm. "You're gonna ruin me, Ethan." "Good," Ethan said, a small laugh escaping him. "Ruin me back." For a moment, they stood there, wrapped in each other, the storm a distant hum. But reality crept in the buzz of Jake's phone, the flicker of the lights, the weight of a town that wouldn't understand. Jake pulled back, his eyes searching Ethan's. "What now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan didn't have an answer, not a clear one. But he took Jake's hand again, lacing their fingers together. "We figure it out, one step at a time." Jake nodded, but his eyes were shadowed. "My dad's coming by tomorrow," he said, the words heavy. "He's been on me about taking over the garage. If he even suspects." Ethan squeezed his hand. "He won't. Not yet. We'll be careful." Jake's smile was faint, but it was there. "You're too good at this," he said, "making me believe we can pull it off." "We will," Ethan said, his voice fierce. "Because I'm not letting you go." The night stretched on, the storm unrelenting. They sat back on the couch, closer now, their shoulders brushing. They talked about high school, about the lake, about the dreams they'd buried. Ethan told Jake about the art school in Chicago he'd applied to, the one he hadn't told anyone about. Jake admitted he'd been saving up, dreaming of a life beyond the garage, maybe somewhere he could breathe. As the hours passed, the tension eased, replaced by something fragile but real. They laughed, they teased. They stole glances that felt like promises. But beneath it all, Ethan felt the clock ticking. Tomorrow would come. And with it, Jake's dad, the town, the world they'd have to face. When the first light of dawn crept through the windows, the storm had quieted, but the air still felt charged. Jake's hand rested on Ethan's knee. A quiet anchor. "Stay?" Jake said, echoing Ethan's words from hours before. "Just stay?" Ethan smiled, his heart full and heavy. "I'm not going anywhere." But as they sat there, the weight of what lay ahead settled over them. This was only the beginning, and the road would be anything but easy. Dawn broke gray and heavy, the remnants of the storm leaving puddles on the street outside Jake's house. Ethan woke to the sound of Jake's quiet breathing. Their legs tangled on the couch where they'd fallen asleep. For a moment, he let himself linger in the warmth of it, Jake's arm draped over him, the faint scent of rain and leather. But reality crashed in like a cold wave. Jake's dad was coming. Ethan shifted, careful not to wake Jake, and sat up. The living room looked different in the morning light. Less like a sanctuary and more like a battlefield littered with pizza boxes and empty cans. His eyes fell on Jake's phone. Silent now, but still a threat. Last night had changed everything. But the world outside hadn't changed at all. Jake stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Morning," he mumbled, his voice rough with sleep. He sat up, rubbing his face. And for a moment, they just looked at each other, the weight of the night settling between them. "You okay?" Ethan asked, his voice soft. Jake's smile was small, fragile. "Yeah. You?" Ethan nodded, but his stomach churned. "Your dad's coming today? What do we do?" Jake's expression darkened. He stood, stretching, his movements restless. "We act normal, like nothing happened." He glanced at Ethan, his eyes softening. "But it did happen, didn't it?" Ethan's heart skipped. "Yeah, it did." Jake crossed to the kitchen, grabbing a coffee pot. "He'll be here by noon. Wants to talk about the garage again. Always the damn garage." His voice was tight, laced with resentment. Ethan followed, leaning against the counter as Jake filled the pot with water. "Tell him no," Ethan said. "Tell him you want something else." Jake snorted. "You think I haven't tried?" He doesn't listen. To him, I'm just an extension of his business. His legacy. He set the pot down hard, water sloshing. If he knew about this, us, he'd lose it. Ethan stepped closer, his voice steady. "Then we don't tell him." "Not yet. But you don't have to live for him, Jake. You can choose." Jake's eyes met his, raw and searching. "Choose what?" "You. A life where we're sneaking around, looking over our shoulders. I want that, I want you, but it's not that simple." "I know it's not," Ethan said, his chest aching. "But last night, you chose me. You came back. That's a start." Jake's shoulders sagged, and he leaned against the counter, his head bowed. "You make it sound possible," he said quietly. "Like we could actually do this." "We can," Ethan said, stepping closer until they were inches apart. He reached out, his fingers brushing Jake's. "We will." Jake's hand closed around his, a silent promise. But the moment was cut short by a sharp knock at the door. They froze, hands dropping. "He's early," Jake whispered, his face pale. Ethan's heart raced. "I'll stay out of the way," he said, stepping back. "Just be you." Jake nodded, but his eyes were wide with panic. He crossed to the door, taking a deep breath before opening it. Mike stood there, his broad frame filling the doorway. his face etched with the same hard lines Ethan remembered from years ago. "You look like hell," Mike said, stepping inside without invitation. His eyes flicked to Ethan, narrowing slightly. "Still hanging around. Huh?" Ethan forced a smile. "Just crashing for the night. Storm was bad." Mike grunted, his gaze returning to Jake. "We need to talk. Alone." Ethan nodded, grabbing his jacket. "I'll grab some coffee down the street." He glanced at Jake, trying to convey everything he couldn't say. Jake's eyes held his for a moment, a flicker of gratitude and fear. Outside, the air was damp, the town quiet under a gray sky. Ethan walked to the diner a block away, his mind racing. He ordered a coffee he didn't want and sat by the window, watching the street. Every car that passed felt like a threat, every glance from a passerby a judgment. He thought of Jake, alone with his dad, and his stomach twisted. What if Mike sensed something? What if Jake buckled under the pressure? His phone buzzed a text from Jake. "He's gone. Come back." Relief flooded Ethan, but it was short-lived. He paid for the coffee and hurried back, his heart pounding. Jake was waiting on the porch, his expression unreadable. "He wants me to sign papers," Jake said as Ethan approached. "For the garage. Full ownership. Says it's time I step up." Ethan's chest tightened. "What did you say?" Jake looked away, his jaw tight. "I didn't say anything. Just nodded. Like always." Ethan stepped closer, his voice low. "You don't have to do this, Jake. You don't owe him your life." Jake's eyes met his, raw and conflicted. "I know. But it's not just him. It's this town. This life. I don't know how to break free." Ethan took his hand, not caring who might see. "You start by choosing yourself. And us." Jake's grip tightened, but his eyes were distant. "I want to," he said. "God, I want to. But I'm scared. Ethan, I'm scared of what happens next." Ethan pulled him close, their foreheads touching. "I'm scared too. But we're in this together." For a moment, they stood there, the world fading away. But the weight of Mike's visit lingered, a reminder that their fight was just beginning. The town, their families, the expectations they'd all come crashing down eventually. But for now, they had this, and Ethan would hold on to it with everything he had. The morning stretched on, heavy with the aftermath of Mike's visit. Ethan and Jake sat on the porch, the air damp and cool, their coffee cups untouched on the steps. Jake's silence was louder than the storm had been, his eyes fixed on the cracked pavement like it held answers he couldn't find. Ethan wanted to fill the quiet, to pull Jake back from wherever his mind had gone. But he waited. He'd learned over the years that Jake needed space to unravel his thoughts. Finally, Jake spoke, his voice low. He didn't even ask. "You know, just assumed I'd take the garage. Like my life's already decided." Ethan's heart ached. He reached for Jake's hand, but Jake pulled back. Not harshly, just enough to keep the distance. "I don't know how to tell him no," Jake said, "not without burning everything down." "Then burn it," Ethan said, his voice fiercer than he meant. "You're not his puppet, Jake. You're allowed to want something else." Jake's eyes flicked to him, sharp and raw. "Like what?" "You. Us. You think I can just walk away from my whole life and not lose everything?" Ethan flinched, but he held Jake's gaze. "You wouldn't lose me." Jake's expression softened, but the fear was still there, etched into the lines around his eyes. "I know," he said quietly, "but it's not just about us. It's my mom, my sister, the guys at the garage. They all expect me to be someone I'm not." Ethan leaned closer, his voice steady. Then show them who you are. The real you. The one I see. Jake's laugh was soft, almost broken. You make it sound so easy. It's not, Ethan admitted. But it's worth it. Jake looked at him. Really looked. And for a moment, Ethan thought he might lean in. Might kiss him right there on the porch. But then a car rolled by, its driver glancing their way. And Jake tensed, pulling back. The moment was gone, swallowed by the weight of the world watching. They spent the day cleaning up the house, moving around each other with a careful intimacy. Every brush of their shoulders, every shared glance, felt like a secret they were guarding. Ethan helped Jake scrub the kitchen, their laughter breaking through the tension when Jake flicked soap suds at him. For a few hours, it felt almost normal, like they could be this. Could be together, without the world pressing in. But reality wouldn't stay quiet. Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from his mom. Dinner tonight. You've been gone all weekend. He stared at the screen, his stomach twisting. He hadn't told her about Jake, about any of this. How could he? You gotta go, Jake asked, noticing his expression. Ethan shook his head. Not yet. But she's gonna ask questions. She always does. Jake nodded, his eyes distant. Yeah. My mom's the same. Always wants to know why I'm not settling down like my cousins. Ethan set his phone down, stepping closer. What do you tell her? Jake shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. That I'm not ready. That I'm figuring things out. But it's getting harder to lie. Ethan reached out, his hand finding Jake's. Then maybe we stop lying. Not today, but soon. Jake's fingers tightened around his, but his smile faded. Soon, he echoed, but the word felt heavy, like a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. That evening, Ethan went home, the weight of the weekend clinging to him. His mom was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of chili, her smile warm but curious. You and Jake have a good time? She asked, her tone light but probing. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. Yeah. Just hung out. She raised an eyebrow but didn't push. You're always with him, she said, almost to herself. He's a good friend. Ethan's chest ached. A good friend. That's what Jake had always been, what everyone saw. But now, he was so much more. And Ethan didn't know how to bridge that gap. He mumbled an excuse and retreated to his room, his mind racing. He texted Jake, miss you already. The reply came instantly, you're making this harder. You know. Ethan smiled, but the ache didn't fade. They were in deep now, and every step forward felt like a step toward a cliff. The next day, Ethan met Jake at the diner, a neutral ground where they could steal a moment without eyes on them. Jake looked tired, his eyes shadowed, but he smiled when he saw Ethan. Dad's pushing harder, he said, stirring his coffee. Wants me to meet with his lawyer this week. Make it official. Ethan's stomach dropped. And you're still not saying no. Jake sighed, leaning back in the booth. I don't know how. Not without him blowing up. He's already suspicious. Keeps asking why I'm distracted. Ethan reached across the table, his hand brushing Jake's. You're distracted because you're living for you. Not him. That's not a bad thing. Jake's eyes softened, but the fear was still there. I want to believe that, he said. I'm trying. They sat there, hands touching under the table, the diner's hum a fragile shield. But Ethan knew it wouldn't last. The town was small, the gossip relentless. Someone would see. Someone would talk. And when they did, Jake would have to choose his family, his life, or them. As they left the diner, Jake's hand lingered on Ethan's arm. A quiet promise. I'm not giving this up. he said, his voice low. Not yet. Ethan nodded, his heart full and heavy. Good. Because I'm not either. But as they walked back into the world, the weight of what lay ahead pressed harder. The storm was gone, but another was coming, and neither of them was ready. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope. Ethan and Jake stole moments when they could quiet evenings at Jake's house. Late-night drives to nowhere, their hands finding each other in the dark. Each touch, each whispered word, was a rebellion against the world they knew. But it came with a cost. The town was starting to notice. Ethan felt it first at the hardware store, where he'd gone to grab paint for his mom. Old man Carter, who'd known him since he was a kid, gave him a long look when he mentioned Jake. You two are thick as thieves lately, Carter said, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. Ethan mumbled something about friendship and left, his skin prickling. Jake felt it too. At the garage, one of the older mechanics, Tom, made a joke about Jake's new girlfriend. His laugh too loud, too pointed. Jake brushed it off. But when he told Ethan later, his voice was tight. They're watching us, he said, his hands gripping the steering wheel as they sat in his truck. They always are. Ethan leaned across the seat, his hand resting on Jake's thigh. Let them watch. We're not doing anything wrong. Jake's eyes flicked to him, torn between fear and want. You know that's not how they see it. Ethan did know. Their town was small, its heart conservative, its gossip a living thing that could destroy them. But he couldn't let go of Jake. Not of this. We'll be careful, he said. We'll figure it out. Jake nodded, but his hands stayed tight on the wheel. I'm meeting the lawyer tomorrow, he said. Dad's pushing hard. Says it's time to grow up. Ethan's chest tightened. You don't have to sign anything. You can say no. Jake's laugh was bitter. And then what? He cuts me off. Kicks me out. I've got nowhere else to go. Ethan. You've got me, Ethan said, his voice fierce. You've always got me. Jake's eyes softened, and he reached for Ethan's hand, squeezing it hard. I know, he said, but I'm not like you. I'm not brave enough to just walk away. You are, Ethan said, leaning closer. You're stronger than you think. They kissed then, in the dim light of the truck, the world outside fading to nothing. It was reckless, parked on a quiet street where anyone could see. But Ethan didn't care. For that moment, it was just them, and it was enough. But the next day, reality came crashing back. Ethan was at the library, sketching ideas for his art school portfolio, when his phone buzzed. A text from Jake. It's done. I signed. Ethan's heart sank. He called Jake, his hands shaking. Why? Ethan asked when Jake picked up. Why didn't you wait? Jake's voice was heavy, defeated. I didn't have a choice. Ethan. He cornered me. Said if I didn't sign, he'd sell the garage to someone else. It's my mom's livelihood too. My sister's. Ethan closed his eyes, the weight of Jake's words crushing him. So that's it. You're just giving up. No, Jake said, his voice sharp. I'm not giving up. I'm trying to keep things together. For them. For us. Ethan wanted to argue, to tell Jake he didn't have to carry everyone else's burdens. But he heard the strain in Jake's voice, the fear, and he softened. Okay, he said. We'll figure it out. Together. That night, Ethan went to Jake's house again, the air heavy with unspoken questions. Jake was quieter than usual, his movements restless as he cleaned up dishes from dinner. Ethan watched him, his heart aching. Talk to me, he said finally, stepping close. Jake set a plate down, his shoulders slumping. I feel like I'm drowning, he said. I signed those papers, and it's like I signed away my life. But then I look at you, and I want to fight for this. For us. Ethan pulled him into a hug, holding tight. Then fight, he whispered. I'm right here. They stood there, wrapped in each other, the world outside a distant threat. But the threat was growing. The next morning, Ethan's mom called him into the living room, her face serious. People are talking, she said, her voice gentle but firm. About you and Jake. Is there something you need to tell me? Ethan's heart stopped. He wanted to tell her everything, to unburden himself of the secret he'd carried for so long. But the words wouldn't come. We're just friends, he said, the lie bitter on his tongue. She nodded, but her eyes were searching. Be careful, Ethan. This town, it's not kind to people who are different. Ethan's throat tightened. He nodded, escaping to his room, his mind racing. He texted Jake, Mom knows something. We need to talk. Jake's reply was immediate. Meet me at the lake. Tonight. The lake was their place, where they'd spent countless summers swimming, laughing, dreaming. Ethan arrived as the sun set, the water reflecting the fading light. Jake was already there, sitting on the shore, his knees drawn up. She knows, Jake asked, his voice low. Not everything, Ethan said, sitting beside him. But she's asking questions. Jake's jaw tightened. My dad's been asking too. Keeps saying I'm off. I don't know how much longer we can keep this quiet. Ethan took his hand, the gesture bold in the open air. Then maybe we don't. Maybe we stop hiding. Jake's eyes met his, wide with fear, but also something else, hope. You mean that? Ethan nodded, his heart pounding. I love you, Jake. I'm done pretending I don't. Jake's breath caught, and for a moment, he just stared. Then he leaned in, kissing Ethan with a fierceness that stole his breath. I love you too, Jake whispered against his lips. God help me. I do. They sat there, hands clasped, the lake stretching out before them. But the world was closing in, and Ethan knew they couldn't outrun it forever. The lake's quiet lapped at the shore, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in Ethan's chest. Jake's words, I love you too, echoed in his mind, a lifeline and a weight all at once. They sat there, hands clasped, the fading light casting long shadows across the water. But the confession, as raw and real as it was, didn't erase the world waiting to judge them. Jake pulled back, his eyes searching Ethan's. What now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We can't just go back to normal. Not after this. Ethan's heart raced. He wanted to say they could leave, start over somewhere new. But the words felt hollow. Jake was tied to this town as family, the garage, the life he'd been handed. And Ethan, with his art school dreams, wasn't sure he could stay. We take it one day at a time, he said finally. We figure out what we want. Together. Jake nodded, but his eyes were shadowed. My dad's already suspicious. If he finds out. Ethan, he trailed off, his hand tightening around Ethan's. I don't know what he'll do. Ethan's stomach twisted. He'd seen Mike's temper, the way it could silence a room. We'll be careful, he said, but the words felt fragile. We'll keep this between us until we're ready. Jake's smile was faint, tinged with fear. Ready for what? For the whole town to turn on us. Ethan leaned closer, his voice fierce. For us to live. Really live. Not hiding. Not pretending. Jake's eyes softened, and he kissed Ethan again. Softer this time. Like a promise. But the moment was cut short by the crunch of gravel behind them. They sprang apart, hearts pounding, as a truck pulled up. It wasn't Mike, just some kids from town. But the fear lingered. "We should go," Jake said, standing. "This place isn't safe anymore." They drove back in silence, the weight of their confession settling between them. Ethan wanted to reach for Jake's hand, but Jake's eyes were fixed on the road, his knuckles white on the wheel. When they reached Jake's house, Ethan followed him inside, the air heavy with unspoken questions. Jake sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. "I meant it," he said finally. "What I said at the lake. I love you. But I'm terrified. Ethan, I've spent my whole life trying to be what everyone expects. I don't know how to be this." Ethan sat beside him, close but not touching. "You don't have to know yet. Just be honest with me. That's enough for now." Jake looked at him, his eyes raw. "You're too good for me. You know that." Ethan smiled, his heart aching. "Nah. We're just right for each other." They talked late into the night, their voices low, their words weaving a fragile hope. Jake admitted he'd dreamed of leaving, of finding a place where he could be himself. Ethan shared his fears about art school, about leaving Jake behind. They laughed. They cried. They held each other. And for a few hours, the world felt possible. But morning brought reality crashing back. Ethan woke to a text from his mom. "We need to talk. Come home." His stomach dropped. He showed Jake, who paled. "What does she know?" Jake asked, his voice tight. "I don't know," Ethan said, his mind racing. "But I can't keep lying to her." Jake nodded, his jaw tight. "Be careful. Okay. If she tells anyone." "I know," Ethan said, pulling him into a quick hug. "I'll handle it." At home, Ethan's mom was waiting in the kitchen, her hands clasped around a mug. "You've been different lately," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You and Jake. People are talking. Ethan, is there something you're not telling me?" Ethan's heart pounded. He wanted to tell her, to unburden himself, but the words caught in his throat. "We're just friends," he said, the lie bitter. "Best friends." She studied him, her eyes soft but searching. "I love you, Ethan, no matter what. But this town, it's not kind. If there's something more, you need to be careful." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "I know, Mom. I will." He left the kitchen, his chest heavy. He texted Jake, "She suspects. But I didn't say anything. We're okay for now." Jake's reply was quick, "Good. But we can't keep this up forever." Ethan knew he was right. The secrecy was eating at them, fraying the edges of what they'd built. That night, they met at the diner again, their booth a small refuge. Jake looked worn, his eyes shadowed. "Dad's been on me all day," he said. "Keeps asking why I'm distracted. I think he knows something's up." Ethan reached for his hand under the table. "We'll figure it out. We just need time." But time was running out. As they left the diner, a group of guys from the garage was outside, their eyes lingering on Jake and Ethan. One of them, Tom, called out, "You two are awful close lately." His tone was teasing, but there was an edge to it. Jake tensed, his hand dropping from Ethan's. "Mind your own business, Tom," he said, his voice sharp. Tom laughed, but his eyes were cold. "Just saying. Jake. People talk." They walked away, but the words hung heavy. Ethan glanced at Jake, whose face was pale. "They're gonna find out," Jake said, his voice low. "And when they do, we'll face it," Ethan said, his voice fierce. Together. Jake nodded, but his eyes were distant. Ethan knew he was scared, and so was he. But as they stood there, hands brushing in the dark, Ethan felt a spark of hope. They'd fight for this for each other no matter what came next. The air felt heavier now, each day a step closer to a reckoning Ethan and Jake couldn't avoid. They kept their distance in public, their touches confined to stolen moments in Jake's truck or the quiet of his house. But the town's eyes were everywhere, and the whispers were growing louder. Ethan felt it at the grocery store, where Mrs. Larson, the cashier, gave him a knowing look when he mentioned Jake. Jake felt it at the garage, where Tom's jokes had turned into pointed questions about why he was always with that art kid. The secrecy was a weight, pressing harder with every glance, every word. One evening, they met at the lake again, the only place that still felt like theirs. The water was still, reflecting the stars above. Jake sat on the shore, his knees drawn up, his eyes distant. "I can't keep doing this," he said, his voice raw. "Hiding. Lying. It's killing me." Ethan sat beside him, his heart aching. "Then let's stop. Let's tell them. Your dad. My mom. Everyone." Jake's eyes widened, fear flashing across his face. "You don't know what you're asking, Ethan. My dad'll disown me. And your mom, she might love you, but will she understand?" Ethan took his hand, the gesture bold in the open air. "I don't know, but I know I love you, and I'm tired of pretending I don't." Jake's breath caught, and he leaned into Ethan, their foreheads touching. "I love you too," he said, "but I'm scared I'll lose everything else." Ethan pulled him closer, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like defiance. "You won't lose me," he whispered, "no matter what." They made a plan that night, fragile but real. They'd tell their families, one at a time, starting with Ethan's mom. They'd save money, make a plan to leave if they had to. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step toward a life where they could be themselves. The next day, Ethan sat his mom down. His hands shook, but he forced the words out. "Mom, I'm in love with Jake. We're together." Her face went still, her eyes searching his. For a moment, Ethan thought she'd turn away, but then she reached for his hand. "I suspected," she said softly. I worry about you. This town, it's not kind to people like you." Ethan's throat tightened. "I know, but I can't keep hiding who I am." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I love you, Ethan. I'll always love you. But be careful. Promise me." He promised, his heart lighter but still heavy with what lay ahead. That night, he told Jake, who looked like he might cry with relief. "She's okay with it?" Jake asked, his voice trembling. "She's trying," Ethan said. "Your turn." Jake's face paled, but he nodded. "Okay. I'll talk to my mom first. She might understand." The next day, Jake went to his mom's house, Ethan waiting in the truck outside. When Jake came back, his eyes were red, but he was smiling. "She was shocked," he said, "but she hugged me, said she just wants me to be happy." Ethan pulled him into a hug, his heart soaring. "One down," he said. "We're doing this." But Jake's dad was another story. They decided to wait, to give Jake time to prepare. They spent the next week planning, dreaming of a life beyond the town. Ethan got an acceptance letter from the art school in Chicago. And for the first time, Jake talked about going with him, about starting over. But the town wasn't done with them. One night, as they left the diner, Tom and a few guys from the garage were waiting. "Heard some rumors." "Jake," Tom said, his voice low, menacing. You and your buddy here got something to tell us. Jake froze, his hand brushing Ethan's. Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady. Back off. Tom, this isn't your business. Tom's laugh was cold. It's everyone's business in this town. Jake's fists clenched, but Ethan grabbed his arm. Let's go, he said, pulling Jake away. They drove to the lake, hearts pounding, the weight of the confrontation sinking in. They're going to tell my dad, Jake said, his voice shaking. It's over. It's not, Ethan said, his voice fierce. We're leaving. Together. We'll start over. Somewhere we can be us. Jake looked at him, tears in his eyes. You really believe we can do this? I do, Ethan said, pulling him close. Because I love you. And that's worth everything. They kissed, the lake stretching out before them, the stars above a quiet witness. The road ahead would be hard. Jake's dad, the town, the world, but they'd face it together. They'd build a life, not in the shadows, but in the light, where love could breathe. And as they held each other, Ethan knew, no matter what came next, they'd already won. They'd chosen each other, and that was enough.